change is something that is very critical. In fact, when I began talking, way back about say 12 years ago, and one of the first subjects that I started discussing was basically called change or die. Basically, that's what I used to challenge people with. I said to them, change or die. And that was basically my, almost my catchphrase, People used to say that about me, COD, not cash on delivery, but change or die. And I used to speak about this everywhere that I went, and to as many places, to as many people. Because it basically struck me how powerful change is, and the thing that remained in my mind is that you cannot, first of all, change the world. We get upset with the world, basically that person needs to change his attitude. These people need to change their attitude. The government needs to change, this needs to change, that needs to change, but change itself cannot happen until you change. And I get this from none other person than Mahatma Gandhi himself. So anyway, going back to why I felt change was so important. This man affected my life from a very early age, long before I began to read up upon him and understand a lot more about him. And I'm talking back again to Mahatma Gandhi. And, my grandfather was a very strong believer, Gandhian, if you like. Someone who looked up to Gandhi and his principles, but he was also very staunchly Malaysian, So, but to him, Gandhi stood for not so much for liberation of India per se, but for the emancipation, for the fact that he fought for people who needed it. Are you with me? And it was then that when I addressed even the Madras Management Academy, most Indians from India don't recognize the fact that Gandhi never had an Indian passport or never took Indian nationality. The fact that they named him Father of India, so to speak, after he had left, didn't change anything, because he left, he was born in India, but in British India. Are you with me? He traveled on a British document to study in England. And again on a British document when he went down to South Africa. And in South Africa, he chose to basically fight for the freedom of the people in South Africa who were not necessarily all Indians. Are you with me? If you take a look at his early pictures in South Africa, you'll find that most of the people who stood by him also included a lot of Chinese. In fact, the Chinese were the first to listen to him. They were the first to get motivated. Surprising as it may seem. These are things that we don't talk about very much. But the Chinese were the first to, they were too indentured workers and laborers, and there was a big population of them, and they felt inspired by him. Are you with me? And there were a lot of whites. There were a lot of whites who joined him at the time. Are you with me? He appealed right across the race barrier. So the picture that we get, because what we talk about is he went to free the Indians in South Africa. He went to free everybody who was basically under the yoke, right, of the colony, of the British colony. And that's what he fought for. He saw humanity as being one. Are you with me? And in fact, it is best described by none other than Nelson Mandela. When Nelson Mandela came as President of South Africa, he came to speak to the Indian Parliament in Delhi. He said to the Indians who were all sitting there, he says, yes, because somewhere along the way, in his speech, the Indian Prime Minister basically referred to Gandhi as being, the emancipator, the freedom giver for South Africa, and he came from India. Are you with me? So that is the tie between South Africa and India. So when Mandela went up to speak, he said, yes, India gave us Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, But South Africa gave the world Mahatma Gandhi. Because it isn't only in South Africa that he grew. So, and the South Africans adore him. Alright? Now, there's a lot more things can be said about Gandhi. Gandhi, for instance, is in 183 stamps around the world. No other personality has ever been that international. 183 countries have put Gandhi in his stamp, in their stamp. Are you getting my point? That's amazing. That's, way above the other two top favorites like John F. Kennedy. Are you getting my point? And Mother Teresa. Why? I mean, this man was nothing, he didn't hold any position. He was not a politician. He never joined a single political party. He was not a tycoon. He was not a general. He never held any position of power. And yet, when he died, the world mourned him. India mourned him. But see, before that, India per se didn't exist. It was just, a matter of 500 princely states that were all heading in different directions. He basically united the people together. And he did that wherever he went. He was able to do that right across the racial bias. When he went to UK, for instance, he went there to basically discuss, or at least argue for India's independence. At the time he arrived, the first time he walked up the steps of the parliament, Winston Churchill, Prime Minister, the most popular Prime Minister Britain ever had at the time, looked down from the Parliament House and saw this frail man in a loincloth, are you with me, walking up the stairs of Parliament. He turns around and looks down and says, "Is that the half-naked Indian fakir who is going to bring down the minds of the British Empire?" And he laughed. But he didn't have much to laugh. A couple of years later, when the most popular Prime Minister in the history of the UK lost his election. He lost primarily because he lost the middle class vote. One of the things that Gandhi did when upon his arrival was he didn't just go and talk to the politicians. He went out to Birmingham, to Manchester, towards Bradford, towards the place where all the factories are, where the British workers worked. And he went out there and he says to them, he basically pleaded with them. He said, please understand the plight of my people. They need to be free. Now, because one of the things he did was buy British last. Like our Dr. Mahathir did, He had the same policy at the time. So nobody bought British. So the entire cloth industry, textile industry depended very much on the colonies to survive. And they were hit very hard when India stopped buying. Are you with me? So he went there and he told them, "Be with me, my brothers and sisters. We have a common cause. We too want freedom." And they had just survived the World War. They resonated. They admired him. And they voted accordingly. So that half-naked Indian fakir. Fakir means bigger. Are you with me? It means bigger. It actually comes from Urdu, but it translates into the British English as well at the time. So it means this half-naked beggar is coming to take us down. But he did. He brought down the might of the British Empire without needing to fire a single bullet. And his cardinal words were, he had many things that he said all across, and he's recorded many times over in history, but the ones that ran in my mind is, be the change that you want to see. Be the change that you want to see. Now what that means is, you want to change someone, you want to change society, you want to change the world, you want to change anything in anybody else. First, you change.